Hello, boys and girls of St. Lucie Public Schools. I am Miss Owens, the math coach at Lawnwood Elementary, and I am excited to work with you guys, so thank you for tuning in with me. In today's lesson, we are going to engage in an activity called Make a Whole. And in this lesson, we are going to find ways to add on to an expression to create a whole. So the bottom goal is to look at how many pieces are up and then move your fraction strips to add more to get to the full whole. Remember, when in doubt, fraction strips out. So let's go ahead and start by reviewing what we know about the different fractions. So our blue represents our whole. Our two red pieces represent our half and our halves, and that means we've taken a whole and we've broken it into two equal sized parts. Together they are called halves, two halves, but each one is called one half. Our light blue pieces are our fourths, and the whole has been broken into four equal parts, and each one of those parts is called 1/4. So just one of these would be 1/4. Moving to the purple pieces, the purple pieces are called the eighths, and the whole has been broken into 8 equal parts, and each one is called 1/8. And then the brown pieces are the 16ths. The whole has been broken into 16 equal sized parts, and each one of those fractions is called 1/16. So make a whole. We're going to use the whole fraction strip as our guide. And we're going to start with the following expression. So we have 1/8. Oh, I'll write it somewhere else because we're probably going to need this space. 1/8 plus 1/8 plus what number equals 1? Now, before we begin with this lesson, we want to review the basics. We know that we need 2 halves to create that whole. We need 4/4 is equivalent to 1. 8/8 is equivalent to 1. And 16/16 is equivalent to 1. So if we have 1/8 and another 1/8, that would be 1/8, 2/8. What else could we add here to the 2/8 to make up the rest of the whole? Okay, let's use the eighths to figure it out. Now, we do know that when we get all of the eighths up there, we will have a whole. So let's count them. We can add 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8, 6/8. So if we had 1/8 plus another 1/8, which were the two that we started out with, I'll put X up under these, or star. We ended up adding 6/8 more to make up the whole. So 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 6/8 equals a whole. Could we have added any other types of fractions to make up that whole? We most certainly could have. So let's go ahead and use our fraction strips to see what other fractions we could have used to make up that whole. And let me bring this up here. 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 6/8 equals 1. Let's see what else we could have added here. Let's try the fourths. 1/8 plus 1/8 plus what number equals 1? Now, right now, I've only added 1/4. Did we make a train to come all the way out to fill up the hole? Not yet. We have to keep adding fourths. So I've added 2/4. Did I make a train that's equivalent to a hole? Not quite. How about now? Yes, I have. So I have 1/8 plus another 1/8 plus 1/4 plus 2/4 plus 3 of the 4th size pieces. So if I have 3 of the 4th size pieces, how would I write that as a fraction? 3/4. You guys are really good at this. Okay, so let's take away the 3/4 and see if we could have added, we could have made a whole using maybe a different type of a fraction. So we still have the 1/8 and the other 1/8 added to what number equals 1? Let's use the 16ths. 1/16, 2/16, 3/16, 4/16, 5/16, 6/16. Have I added enough 16ths to make a whole? Not quite. 1/16, 2/16, 3/16, 4/16, 5/16, 6/16, 7/16, 8/16, 9/16, 10/16, 11/16, 12/16. So that's a 12 above the fraction bar, and why did I put 18? 12 above the fraction bar and 16 below the fraction bar. So 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 12/16 equals or is equivalent to 1. Good job, guys. So we're going to go ahead and continue to explore this concept of making a whole. Remember, use your fraction strips. And we're going to get started with 1/2 and 1/8. Moving these 16ths out of the way. And if you haven't gotten your fraction strips by now, make sure that you guys go ahead and get that material ready. Okay. So now we are going to add, we have 1/2 plus 1/8 plus what number equals 1? Well, we're going to go ahead and add more 8ths. 1/8, 2/8, 3/8. 1/2 plus 1/8 plus 3/8 equal 1. And remember, the name of this activity is called Make a Whole. And that's exactly what we're doing when we are adding the other fractions. We're working on making a whole. So let's see what else we can use to make a whole. So we have 1/2 plus 1/8 plus what number equals 1? Well, let's try the 16ths. 1/16, 2/16, 3/16, 4/16, 5/16, 6/16. So how do you write 6/16 as a fraction? Because we started out with 1/2 and 1/8, and we joined in 6/16. So 6 goes at the top part of the fraction because that is the amount of fractions being described here. And 16 goes at the bottom part of the fraction because the pieces that we added are a part of a whole that was divided into 16 parts. So 1/2 plus 1/8 plus 6/16 equals 1. Okay. You guys are doing a wonderful job here. We're also going to play around and see if we can join different fractions. Like we did before, we're going to add different fractions to see what other ways we can combine the fractions to make a whole. So let's add 1/4, and I'm seeing a little tiny section here. So I'm thinking that maybe 1/8 can fit here. And it did. So 1/2 plus 1/8 plus 1/4 plus 1/8, excuse me. And these would be the additional numbers equals 1. Hey, if I move that 1/8 right there, remember we learned in one of our activities that even when we change the order of the add-ins, when we're adding, the total sum remains the same. So all 4 of the fractions that we put up here are equivalent to 1 when combined, but I switched around the order of the fractions. So I can write this a different way to say 1/2 plus 2/8 plus 1/4 equals 1 whole. And that will be 1/2 plus 2/8 plus 1/4 equals 1. Okay, so let's try some other ways. When you guys begin your lesson in your workspace journal, you will be working on page 16 and 17. And you will continue to use these strategies to combine fractions to create a whole. So we're going to try again. This time we are going to use 1/2 and 1/4. So 1/2 plus 1/4 plus what number equals 1? So let's try and add 1/4. Does it add up to create a whole? Yes, it does. So 1/2 plus 1/4 plus another 1/4 equals a whole. So let's try it again. This time we're going to do 1/2 and we'll do the 1/4. And I'm going to write this up here. 1/2 plus 1/4 plus 1/4 equals 1. I need to free up some space here. Let's try adding some eighths. Do I have space to add another eighth? Yes, I do. I haven't quite made a train that is as long as one whole. Whoops. So there we have it. 1/2 plus 1/4 plus 1/8 plus 1/8 equals 1. And I can rewrite those 2 1/8. How could I rewrite the 2 1/8? Because I have 1/8 twice here. Do you remember how to rewrite it? 1/2 plus 1/4 plus 2/8 equals 1. You guys are doing an amazing job. Okay. And let's try it one more time. With the 16ths. So we have 1/2 plus 1/4 plus what number equals 1? That's 1/16, 2/16, 3/16, 4/16. So I have 1/2 plus 1/4 plus 1/16. I have it 4 times. Do you remember how to write 4/16? Excellent. 4 goes at the top of the fraction because that tells me that there's 4 fractions here. And 16 goes at the bottom part of the fraction under the fraction bar because these fractions came from a whole wherein it was cut into 16 equal parts. So 1/2 plus 1/4 plus 4/16 equals 1. So how do you guys feel about combining fractions to make a whole? You're doing an excellent job. We're going to keep practicing. Practice makes you better. That's my motto. I want you guys to take out your fraction strips if you haven't done so at this time. And I'm going to give you guys some time to do it on your own, and then I'll come back and walk you guys through it. We'll do like your turn, and then we'll check through it. Okay. So we're going to do 1/2. Nope, we're not going to do 1/2. Let's try something else. Let's do 1/4. And how many 16ths are we using here? 2/16. So 1/4 plus 2/16 plus what number equals 1? Go ahead and take your fraction strips, and I want you guys to finish the train so that we can check it. I'll give you guys a few minutes. Okay, so let's look at all the different ways that we can make this train. Okay, I can put 1/2 here, and then I'd have to do 1/8. So this second one says 1/4 plus 2/16 plus 1/2 plus 1/8 equals 1 whole. Do you agree? Absolutely. So let's put the 1/4 up here and the 2/16, and let's find other ways. Let's try the 1/8. Well, let's try some 4ths. I haven't quite made it to, I haven't finished it yet. Okay, so now we have 1/4 plus the 2/16 plus, what do we get in the middle? How many 1/4 pieces do we have here? 2 1/4 pieces. Do you remember how to write 2/4? Awesome. 2 at the top, 4 at the bottom, and then plus 1/8. 1/8 equals 1. You guys are doing a really good job. I'm super duper proud of you. Okay, I'm gonna move some of these pieces back because I want to keep working with this. So let's try some eighths. So we have 1/4. This is our original pieces. Plus the 2/16, plus which fractions will give us a whole. So let's just do some eighths. 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8, 5/8. Plus 5/8 equal 1 whole. Okay. How many 16ths do you think it will take? I think it's going to take a lot of 16ths. Well, it's not going to take all of them because you need all 16 of them. But I'm guessing maybe around 8. I don't know. Let's see. So we want to do it again. 1/4 plus the 2/16 plus what number equals 1. Now I'm going to go ahead and write the bottom part of my fraction, which is 16, because we know that we're going to use the 16ths this time. What determines what I'll place on the top part of my fraction is how many 16ths we use. So let's get ready to count. 1/16, 2/16, 3/16, 4/16, 5/16, 6/16, 7/16, 8/16, 9/16, 10/16. Wow. I think I said 8/16. I was wrong. It takes 10/16. So let's revisit. 1/4 plus 2/16 plus 10/16 equals 1 whole. I'm just curious to see. Oh, I was wondering. Yeah, we will use some of the 16s up here. Okay. So you guys are doing an awesome job. Let's try it once more. Are you getting a feel of how you can combine fractions to make a whole? Yes, and the fraction strips are doing a very good job at helping us to see when we have made that whole. In this last turn, I want you guys to, we're going to focus a little bit more on the equivalent fractions that we're seeing. For example, before I took away some of my 16ths, I could have looked at how many of these 16s align with the half strip. So within making a whole, we are going to look at equivalent fractions as well. Okay. So we're going to begin with 1/2 and let's do 1/8. What can we, well, let's just do 1/2. What can we use to make a half? What can we use to make half? Can you guys see the board? There we go. Okay. What can we use to make half? 1/2 plus What number equals 1? Let's try the other half first. 1/2 plus half. Doesn't that make sense? If you were to take a orange and you cut it in half, you have 1/2 over here and 1/2 over here. If you join the two halves back together, you get the whole orange. So 1/2 plus 1/2 equals 1. What else can we add to half to get 1? Let's do the fourths. How many fourths can I add to half to get 1? 1/4, 2/4. 1/2 plus 2/4 equals 1. What about the eighths? How many eighths do you think you can add to half to get 1? Maybe so. Let's count the eighths. 1/8. Gotta move some of these 16s out of the way. 2/8. 3/8. 4/8. Did you know that 1/2 plus 4/8 equals 1 whole? I bet you did. Good. Kiss your brain. You guys are so bright. So 1/2 plus 4/8 equals 1. And let's try the 16ths. What do you predict? How many 16ths do you think we're going to need to add to half to make 1 whole? 1/2 plus blank equals 1. And we're going to go ahead and put the bottom part of the fraction because we know we're using the 16ths. We're using the fractions that the whole has been divided into 16 equal parts. So we're going to go ahead and get this fraction ready. The top part of the fraction will reflect the number of pieces that we need to add to that half to make it a whole. Let's count the 16ths. 1/16, 2/16, 3/16, 4/16, 5/16, 6/16, 7/16, 8/16. 1/2 plus 8/16 equals 1 whole. Good job. So in this lesson, we learned how to combine fractions to create a whole. We started out with some fractions and we joined in more to finish the train to make the train the length of 1 whole. And that, my friends, is how you make a whole out of fraction strips. You guys did an amazing job. I am super duper proud of you. You're going to continue practicing making a whole in your workspace journal on pages 16 and 17. Don't forget to show your work and don't forget to use your fraction strips. When in doubt, fraction strips out. Thank you guys for tuning in with me. Keep trying, keep doing your best, and I will see you next time. Bye.